especially. It's a very interesting history of the tarot cards, which is sort of a European Western divination experience. But the most persuasive model, or we should say not model precisely, but the most persuasive relay for how this divination system might work is actually the I-Ching, the Book of Changes of Chinese divination. And it makes sense that this would be the most powerful and persuasive divination relay, because it's the oldest, for one thing. I mean, it's just the most oldest, most developed, most complex system. And actually, when you look into it, it turns out that the Ifa divination systems of Africa that became the basis for Afro-Caribbean divination systems of Santeria and Vodun is actually very, very similar to the I-Ching. It works very, very similarly. So it's just a different cultural base, obviously, the way it's accessed, the kind of stories that are accessed and things. You get the wisdom of Africa as opposed to the wisdom of China and one or the other. But in terms of how the things actually work formally, they're very similar. So how does the I-Ching work? Well, it's based on a system of 8 trigrams that are considered to be germinal situations. Because the thing about Chinese wisdom is that they don't have the kind of abstractive, conceptual cosmology or metaphysics that the Greeks developed that have led to our particular kind of science. But rather they saw the forms were in experience itself. So, say Plato's problem was how to get being and becoming together. Well, this would be, the Chinese would say how to get yin and yang together. Well, for them, they were already together. They were already in an interactive, dualistic relationship. And you didn't need Kora. You didn't need the receptacle or the space in which they got together, because they were already interrelated. And all you had to do was look around at, say, the cycle of the seasons, to look at the cycle of day and night, and these kinds of other cycles in nature to see a kind of fluctuating between principles. And that was the model of the way the world worked. And the way the world worked is that it changes. There's change. This is what the Chinese discovered. While the Greeks were discovering things, which were these objects that had essences and properties, the Chinese were discovering change. So then these 8 trigrams are then combined, permutation combination, into 64 hexagrams, which constitute the fundamental structural situation of everything that's possible to happen, at least within the point of view of an oral or of a non-industrial civilization. And so this is how we then came to understand what had happened at the Miami River, was that we did not have a complete divination system, say in the model of the tarot, with a set of archetypes, but that what we had was one situation. We had, in our consultation with the Miami River, and then turning that into an image, we had one situation, and that situation was a situation of impoundment. And if you look at the I-Ching, I mean, we found, for example, you look at, especially those versions of the I-Ching that include examples from Chinese art that illustrate the particular situation of the hexagram. We found one, for example, where the illustration was that of a moored boat. So we say, well, that's very like our Haitian trader, impounded. Now that particular one was meditation. It wasn't a negative kind of mooring or arresting. It was a positive one where a person withdraws and meditates. But there was another hexagram, which was stagnation. Actually, the Chinese illustration was Lao Tzu leaving China in disgust with the declining empire. He was at a border and being checked by a border guard. And that resonated with our sense of the Miami River being a border between the United States and the Caribbean. But the point was there was this feeling of stagnation. And what we were getting from this illustrated I-Ching was the idea that a situation is structured by a mood, it's structured by an atmosphere. Now, of course, along with that mood and atmosphere goes a certain set of judgments, a certain set of advice. But the point of consulting the I-Ching is not a fortune-telling system. It's a wisdom system in which what you want to find out is, what is the situation that I'm in? I'm going to, flip the coins or do the arrow stocks or what the chance part of the operation in order to find out which situation I'm in order so that I can act. I want to be sure that I act with the forces that are at work in the changing situation that I'm in and not against them. Because if I act against those forces, I'll be destroyed. And so we thought, oh, well, that's what's happened is we've discovered the situation. And with attunement, this isn't just Ravel's situation, this is the situation of America. America is impounded in a certain sort of way. This is the impasse that we find ourselves in. Well, the conclusion that we drew from this about how to design our website is that we're not ready to set up a complete divination system, but rather what the purpose of the website should be is, for the emergency, is to actually make a new divination system, a postmodern digital electrate system that represents wisdom, modern wisdom, in the way that the I-Ching represents Chinese classical or ancient wisdom. Because this is the other thing we learned about divination systems, is that they reflect. I mean, once you understand the philosophy or the metaphysics of the civilization, you're not surprised by anything in the divination system, because the divination system is tapping the wisdom of that civilization. And the Chinese ancient civilization is very conservative. I mean, the advice is always wait, don't act. Don't act hastily. I mean, there will come a moment that the Greeks called kairos, when the opportunity to act will be there, and the divination system will let you know when that is. But for the most part, the wisdom is, if you don't like the way things are now, wait, because what happens? Change. Everything changes. Everything waxes and wanes. So it's a kind of conservative philosophy, and we can see this in the politics of China. It's very conservative empire, or kind of civilization. Well, we can imagine that the modern world's divination system would have a different kind of wisdom. And it's not for us to say what that wisdom is, but what we think the emergency can do is it can encapsulate in this memory structure an access to the wisdom of America that others might want to call foolishness. Actually, it might be a kind of our wisdom might be foolishness, but this would be part of when we designed the system. We'd discover whether we thought it was wise, or what it was advising was wise or foolish, and of course we could adjust accordingly. And the purpose wouldn't be so much to actually have some sort of practicing divination system that people would use to make business decisions or something, but that it would be a way to learn about how America actually works, or how the world, because there's no reason why this would be America, but why couldn't this be a global wisdom system, a syncretic system combining the wisdom of the Greco-Roman Judeo-Christian heritage with the heritages of the non-Western civilizations. But so this is the ambition, and this is the kind of attraction, is that when you came to study the data of Miami or Niagara or whatever the site was, it would be motivated by the fact that you were thinking about your own situation, your own difficulties, and you were wanting to find out about your own situation, how you should act, what was in your own best interest, and you would find that out by looking at the situation of Miami. And that's the attraction principle.
Actually, about 10 more minutes of film. Let me just go ahead and shut it off.